welcome to the next episode of our Going Digital series. Our digital subject matter expert for today is Vinod Mathur. He's a Senior Director, Strategic Services at Blue Yonder, which is formerly known as JDA. He's the head of the India Center of Expertise for Strategic Services. He's an alumnus of IIT Mumbai and IIM Ahmedabad, and he's been a practitioner of supply chain planning, supply chain implementation, and strategy for over 20 years, starting first with I2 and then JDA, which is now known as Blue Yonder. So it's a great privilege to be speaking to one of the foremost authorities on supply chain planning in India. So he's going to be talking to us about the role of supply chain in digital initiatives. So welcome to our discussion, Vinod, and thanks for your time.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thanks for this opportunity. Hope to have a very interactive session with you today.
Certainly. So supply chain planning, Vinod. So this is one of the topics, which we see in India, at least. While we have many companies who have done well in this, it's still an area which is not so well understood, or let's say not so well leveraged in manufacturing companies. Both large companies and small companies have struggled to really leverage this optimization, supply chain optimization, and so on. So it'll be great to hear from you, what are those key opportunities in supply chain which can unlock value, which can facilitate growth for companies?
You're right in your observation, Siddharth. What my experience has been, especially in India, that traditionally manufacturing companies have focused on manufacturing. I mean, given that that's what they excel in, that has also kind of created a silo or a subdivision, I would say, that between manufacturing, procurement on one side, and logistics and distribution on one, and then the sales and marketing is the third one. That's how businesses have grown in the past, and that's where that kind of a bifurcation or trifurcation has helped them achieve excellence in their own areas. Now, what we see increasingly, and some of the recent situations like COVID-induced lockdown and disruptions, and even when we look at companies now moving closer to the consumer, these silos have started to become started to create kind of obstacles in really unlocking the complete value of the company as such, of the business, to be able to deliver to what the market needs. So that's where I think the largest potential now that exists is, how do I take what I have already done in terms of excelling in my own area? Like as a manufacturer, I've improved my yields, my maintenance, breakdowns, and all of that. On the logistics, I have done a lot to improve my transportation cost. I've started investing into sensing what the market demand is and how can I get closer to the consumer. Mm-hmm. So the next logical step now would be, how do I tie all this together? Because that's where the value would come. Because if I'm getting a good demand signal from the market, but my manufacturing still says I'm going to produce the mix which kind of increases my throughput, right? Then there is a disconnect which emerges. So that's what I think. And traditionally, manufacturing, if you look at the heavy or the B2B manufacturing space, the thought process has also been that, yeah, there is a market, we'll produce whatever we can and let's see how we can sell it. And maybe that was okay a few decades back, and that kind of an approach. Say, if I look at, say, steel manufacturing, for example, that may make sense because the demand out there it used to be quite a lot more than what the capacity existed. But now, as more consumer-oriented industries are growing and we are getting these kind of signals, like with all the technology layer that we have, we are now able to connect more to what the market really needs. The need to become more dynamic and go across these silos is really the largest opportunity the businesses now have to kind of take the next step, the next level in terms of efficiencies across the supply chain. And the recent situation in terms of disruptions that have happened in the supply chain, have really exposed the chinks. I mean, in the whole chain. I was talking to a few of my customers, large manufacturers in India, who have done a lot in the space of supply chain, some who have not done that much. And the common feedback we got was nobody had predicted what disruption would happen in this in 2020. And it really exposed where the supply chain lacks, or where are the broken links, right? I mean, they have been focused on certain areas, they have done well, uh, but this kind of a major disruption kind of exposed. And even as a supply chain head, as a manager, it was very apparent that how this is now not really connected. I mean, I could have really done much better. So that, in my view, is where companies can really move or aspire to move.
So if I were to ask you, name, let's say, top three initiatives that one could take from a supply chain planning, perspective, supply chain perspective, what would those be? For let's take an example, let's say, of a consumer goods company or a manufacturing company. What would those top three initiatives be?
Yeah. So if it's a consumer oriented or consumer industry, I think the topmost today is, given the amount of technology that we have access to, really investing into uh, understanding the market, understanding your consumer needs. Because typically these industries would have a distributor and a retailer as intermediaries, which kind of create some kind of a distance between the manufacturer and the final consumer. So that would be one of the topmost area to invest in. A lot of companies have already started doing that, getting access to the point of sale data from retailers on their products. Uh, but doing much more than that, I mean, how do I now use the point of sale data? Or how do I use, say, if I have access to a consumer profile based on the loyalty programs and all that, then how do I utilize all this together to get a better sense of my market? I think that would be the topmost. And I would differentiate that from forecasting in the traditional sense that we know. This is really understanding the market and understanding your final consumer, the profile of your consumer. The second, I would, in my view, would be uh, that even today, I find a lot of companies confuse supply chain with just logistics. Maybe because distribution network kind of plays a very prominent role. Because inside the plant, people feel that, oh, that's one box. I'll do my bit there. But my supply chain is really outside the plant in my distribution network. But the the second point the second area in my view would be to really understand that supply chain extends, it connects your distribution into your manufacturing and into the procurement, right? So it's not it doesn't really stop only at the logistics piece. So while optimizing logistics standalone is okay for a distribution planner, but as the supply chain head, I need to really look at what's the total landed cost, or what's the overall impact in my supply chain. So that would be, in my view, the second largest area to really look into. And third would be, in my view, overall supply chain analytics, which again spans across all the different departments, not just focused on the consumer side, but there is a lot which I believe has been untapped on the supply side of analytics. But even understanding, say, the frequency of breakdown of my machines, or what kind of process yields. There is a lot of engineering that goes into it, but can I start predicting based on the kind of mix that I'm trying to produce through my machines? Is there a correlation, for example, between that and the kind of yield which I get? I'm just giving some couple of use cases. But there is a lot to be explored, in my view, on the supply side of analytics. A lot of people have focused on the demand side of analytics, and there is a lot of use cases you would find, and libraries of work or software packages which will focus on that aspect. But this is really the third largest opportunity, I would say.
Very nice. So, Vinod, when there are such large chunks of opportunities sitting there in the supply chain, right? Be it on the supply side, be it in the manufacturing plant itself, be it on the customer side, there are so many chunks of value sitting there in terms of optimizing what's happening, in terms of finding, better ways to serve the customer in a more optimized manner. When there's so many chunks of opportunities lying there, what do you think is stopping companies from actually doing this? What are the challenges that they are facing that are stopping them from harnessing these opportunities?
I believe it's not a technology issue. It's not software which is stopping or technology which is stopping anyone. In my view, I would still say it is the mindset. I mean, I might be making some controversial statement here, but I believe, and if I have to take an analogy of what you see on the road, right, in traffic,
Yeah, yeah,
all of us know that if we drive in lanes, everybody would reach faster, right? But do we drive in lanes? We don't. I mean, it's nothing to do with the condition of the road or the traffic lights and all of that, right? Uh, it's just in the
discipline,
mind that no,
discipline.
yeah, it's just a matter of discipline. I know there is a collective good. I may try to squeeze my car and try to optimize my performance that, okay, let me reach faster than the other person. But it doesn't work. At the end, everybody is going to reach late. So that in my view, is the first aspect of where the barrier is, right? It's in the mind to accept this fact that there is a collective good which we can work towards, as opposed to focusing only on my department and excelling in, like, yes, I have improved my throughput. This is the maximum throughput I have got. So manufacturing says, yes, I have done my part. Logistics says, I have done my distribution optimization. Doesn't matter where I'm sourcing from, I have reduced the overall costs, and so on, right? Or procurement says, I have gone and hedged, done a lot of hedge buys, and I, I have done my part. But whether it's the collective optima, we don't know. It may not be there. So and this is the topmost change management challenge we face in most of the projects when companies are moving from Excel based planning to a software based, right? The first step which they take, it's not the software configuration that is a challenge. I mean, data is definitely there, but this mindset change is really a big hurdle to overcome. And the second aspect to the mindset is also a belief or an appreciation that, yes, a system can actually do, in many cases, a better job than what I can do manually. Yeah. We have, we usually tend to believe that there are a lot of soft constraints in the supply chain, which we may not be able to model in the software. And we kind of create some kind of, I would say, a protectionary bubble, right? In that sense, saying that, no, the system will not understand all these nuances. I have to really do it manually. But I have had some of the supply chain leaders now starting to question their team that all these manual planning and the manual judgments you are putting in, show me the value of that. Show me how that was a better, in the long run, over like a 6-month or a 12-month horizon, that yes, that decision was a better decision than what my system was telling me upfront. So I believe, yes, software and technology and data, all that is there, but it really boils down to working towards a collective optima or a global optima across my departments. That's the first. And second is accepting the fact that system, in many cases, most of the cases, can actually do better, if not the same. I mean, it can actually do better than what I have been doing manually.
Great. So, on a different line, what can be done to address these challenges? I mean, mindsets are very difficult to conquer and to change. What has been your experience in handling this kind of a challenge? Because supply chain is something which is not so well understood. So mindsets will be even stronger when you don't understand something very well.
The success, I mean, in the projects or in transformation programs where we have seen the highest amount of success is where we have had the sponsorship from the topmost level. That's one of, I would say, I would rate that as the topmost critical success factor.
Sure.
The appreciation at the topmost level, and if that is there, other things will fall in place. Because once I have that appreciation, the leaders will make sure my metrics change. Behavior in a corporate or in any organization is driven by the way I'm measured. All of us know that. So
Yeah.
if my metrics change from improving, increase in throughput to plan adherence, right? Automatically, it changes. It changes my behavior. Now I have to make sure that I'm adhering to the plan. And then it is somebody else's, the central planning or the planning department's KPI to make sure the plan as such has the highest EBITDA or the highest margin contribution or whatever my overall objectives may be. So that, I think it has to come from the top. We have run into certain programs where the mid management was driving this, but when it finally came to sign-offs and all of that, the top management would then start questioning okay, but so tell me so how is this really helping me? What's the benefit to the business? Then it kind of puts everything in a disarray. You do a lot of work, a lot of money, effort, time, everything gets invested, and then at the end, because someone in the higher up did not completely appreciate the nuances and what was really being done, the whole thing gets shelved. So, I would say among all the factors, that would be because that will drive everything, right? I mean,
Got it. Got it.
yeah.
So, there is this talk nowadays about, I mean, when we are saying going digital, that's our theme. So, we want to just demystify first briefly about this digital supply chain, and how does one bring it to life?
In terms of, I would say, digital supply chain, elements of that already exist or already existed even many years back. If you look at the first thing from a transaction tracking, right? So as I moved towards capturing activities which are happening in the supply chain, right? So that I would say was pretty much the first step in this whole journey of digital supply chain, where we are able to mimic that I have a physical warehouse, I see it in my systems as a digital location. Any movement, any lane, I start seeing that. So the original, I would say my first digital supply chain representation came from that world, right, of capturing transactions. And now we talk about a digital twin, which is much more advanced in terms of being able to capture everything that's happening out there, and even being able to monitor and control activities through the digital layer. So I would just kind of demystify that to say it's, there's definitely the word digital, but let's not get overwhelmed by that and what really it means, or what's the how do I enable, and making it a large, making it much larger than what it may really be. So it's in simple words, it is mimicking your supply chain in a technology layer. That's what is called as a digital twin. And being able to track is the first step, monitor, analyze, and get insights out of what really is going on. And at the last stage would be then being able to control, and the control itself can start to become autonomous, right? I mean, I can have systems start recommending a lot of things, which can start driving activities which are happening in my supply chain. So yes, I know it's the buzzword. Definitely, it has its advantages, and I mean, not advantages. I would say it has a lot of benefit which it can bring to the business. We need to definitely focus on that, but at the same time, we need to also unpeel the layers and say, okay, so what does it really mean? How do I really do it? As opposed to making it uh, something which is like a halo out there, and something which is maybe unachievable, or from that perspective.
So, Vinod, if you want to make something like this come to life, right, a digitized supply chain, end to end, including my planning, execution, the end to end, and especially for businesses which have gone digital or going digital, how does one bring this to life? What are the key considerations that leaders of organizations or supply chains must have in mind when they are planning for something like this?
I would kind of fall back on the time-tested dimensions of people, process, and technology, right? And now a lot of a lot of consulting firms also talk about a fourth one, which is around data or governance. So let's say, okay, all these four dimensions, and any transformation that we are doing on the in the digital space, if we focus on these four dimensions, it would if if we focus on these four dimensions, things would automatically start becoming much clearer, right? It's as I said, it's if you demystify and unpeel the layers and say, okay, let's go to these frameworks. So when we look at people, right? So there is uh, an element of talent, and the element of talent we need to focus on. I mean, it's not just once the once employees, I mean, once I've hired somebody into my organization, but it is all, it starts all the way from building that kind of an ecosystem around, right from the educational curriculum, the kind of exposure which students are getting in their internships, and as they go on to kind of then join our organization, that people aspect has to be handled right up front, and that kind of relates back to the mindset point which we were talking
Yeah.
about earlier,
Yeah.
right? And then if I just take an example from a process perspective, many, not many, I would say a lot of companies may do the mistake of uh, just trying to automate their existing processes. Right? So when we look at transformation, we should also look at, say, reimagining the way we run our planning processes, or we run the business itself. Right? Instead of just saying, okay, this is how I do it today, and let's see how the system can help me automate. I mean, that's a very myopic view when it comes to the transformation. From a technology, I think there are, I'm sure, a lot of your guests also would have spoken on that subject, and there is a lot out there to read. And how do I choose the right technology for transformation, for a digital transformation? So there are again multiple elements there, right from, as we said, from tracking to core optimization to data analytics, insights, and moving all the way to an autonomous supply chain. So that's where the bouquet of tech offerings or the technology choices that exist can help, depending on where you are in the journey. Right? And then comes the governance or the data aspects. So if we say, if it's around the governance, we also touched upon, there has to be a top management buy-in. So everything else will fall in place. All said and done, corporates, I mean, don't really run on democracy, right? In that sense, I mean, there has to be alignment all the way to the top, and then things do start falling in place. I mean, it may be very blunt analogies, but that's how things work, right?
Absolutely, Vinod. I think this is all very practical experience coming out from a person who spent 20 years working in the industry, implementing supply chain in multitude of companies. It was a pleasure speaking with you, Vinod, and getting your insights on supply chain and digital supply chain. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Siddharth. Thanks for this opportunity.
My pleasure.